I'm a detective. I think the murderer is my best friend. Being a detective has always been more than just a job to me. I've solved cases that others have given up on, unraveled mysteries that seemed impossible. But this time, the case feels different. Too close. Too personal. It all started about 6 weeks ago when a series of brutal murders began in our small town. The victims were all young women, each one found in a state that could only be described as nightmarish. Their bodies were mutilated in ways that suggested the killer had a deep-seated hatred, a need to completely destroy their victims. The media dubbed the perpetrator the Butcher, a fitting name for someone so ruthless. Despite the gruesome nature of the crimes, the killer was meticulous. No evidence, no witnesses, and no pattern to the locations or times of the murders. Whoever the butcher was, they were calculating and careful, leaving the entire town in a state of fear. From the start, I was determined to catch this monster. Every spare moment I had, I pored over case files, re-examined crime scenes, and interviewed anyone who might have seen or heard something. But nothing turned up. The investigation was going nowhere, and it was driving me insane. My best friend Alex had been a constant support through it all. We'd been friends since childhood, inseparable. He'd always had my back, and I had his. He wasn't in law enforcement, but he had a sharp mind, and often over drinks, we'd talk through cases together. He'd helped me piece together clues more times than I could count. As the case dragged on, I started noticing odd things. It was little stuff at first. Alex seemed unusually interested in the details of the case, asking more questions than usual, wanting to know every development. I didn't think much of it at the time. He knew how much this case was getting to me, and probably just wanted to help. But then, there were the coincidences. Alex always seemed to know things before I did. He'd mention a new detail about a victim before it was released to the public or suggest a potential lead before I even had the chance to look into it. When I asked how he knew, he'd shrug it off, saying he must have read it somewhere or overheard it. But I started keeping track, and the pattern was undeniable. One night, after too many drinks, Alex slipped up. We were at our usual bar, the lights dim and the place nearly empty. We were talking about the case, as always, when he said something that made my blood run cold. He mentioned a detail about the latest victim, something that only the killer would know. It was a small thing, something that even I had overlooked in the initial report. But there it was, slipping from his lips as casually as if he'd been discussing the weather. I didn't react right away. I couldn't afford to tip him off that I was onto him. Instead, I played it cool, nodding along, trying to figure out if he was just drunk and misspeaking, or if this was the breakthrough I'd been searching for. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't focus on anything other than the possibility that my best friend might be the butcher. The idea was absurd, insane even, but I couldn't shake it. I went back through everything I knew about Alex, our shared history, looking for signs I might have missed. And then I remembered something. A few months before the murder started, Alex had gone through a rough breakup. He'd been seeing a woman named Sarah for a while and things had seemed serious. But then, out of nowhere, she ended it. He hadn't taken it well, had become withdrawn, angry. I'd chalked it up to heartbreak, but now, with everything I knew, it felt like something darker. I started digging into Alex's past, his relationships, his whereabouts on the nights of the murders. The more I looked, the more things didn't add up. He had no alibi for any of the nights in question. In fact, he'd been unusually vague about what he'd been up to. And then there was the fact that all the victims bore a striking resemblance to Sarah. Confronting Alex was out of the question. If he was the butcher, there was no telling what he might do if he realized I was onto him. Instead, I began setting a trap, laying the groundwork to catch him in the act. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, pretending everything was normal when inside, I was consumed with fear and suspicion. Finally, I got the break I needed. A few nights ago, I received an anonymous tip, someone claiming they'd seen a man fitting Alex's description near the latest crime scene. The tip was vague, but it was enough to get a warrant to search his place. When we raided his apartment, the evidence was overwhelming. Hidden in a locked room were the tools of his trade, knives, saws, and other implements, all meticulously cleaned but unmistakably stained with blood. There were photos, too, of the victims, taken before and after he'd done his work. And there, on his desk,